Hello and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynne Testoni. I'm a journalist and content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we bring you all kinds of tips, tricks and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
On The Content Bite, we love an automation.
Oh, we so do. We so do.
Anything that saves us time is awesome, which is why I loved Rounded. It tracks invoices so I don't have to remember who's paid me or who needs chasing up. And I was wasting so much time on admin, literally hours every week. And now it takes me about 2 minutes to send an invoice. I also really love the gamification of Rounded. You can look on the interface and look at all the little pie charts.
You set your targets.
Set your targets. It's amazing. So, yeah, big thumbs
And if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you're also in luck because you can save 20% on any annual Rounded plan. And see the show notes for details. Well, hello again. So it's just Lynne this week. Rachel's not well, so I'm doing a solo episode. Well, not really, because we've got an amazing guest today. And I've just finished her book, and it's just amazing. It's really powerful, profound, and all those words. So we're going to chat a little bit about it. And I have to say that this is Lucia Osborne-Crowley, and she's a court reporter, and she's done the most amazing book. It's called The Lasting Harm, and it's about witnessing the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. And I just think I have such admiration for her, and I can't wait to hear about her experiences. So before I get her into the hot seat, I'll just do a quick bio, read out, a little bit about Lucia, and we'll have a good chat. So Lucia Osborne-Crowley is an Australian-trained lawyer, legal reporter, journalist, essayist, and the author of 3 books. Amazing. I Choose Eleanor, My Body Keeps Your Secrets, and the new release, The Lasting Harm, Witnessing the Trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. Her news reporting has appeared in ABC News, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, GQ Australia, Saturday Paper, and Women's Agenda. Her long-form writing has appeared in The Lifted Brow and Meanjin. So Lucia's forensic but accessible reporting of the Maxwell trial was described as some of the best and most trauma-informed coverage of the case. Having read the book, definitely my view. And it saw her social media following grow by 35,000 followers. She's appeared as an expert journalist on the Maxwell and Prince Andrew cases on several news channels, and she's currently working for Law 360 as a court reporter from London. So welcome, Lucia. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction. It's really, really nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. You're joining us from London, are you?
I'm actually in Edinburgh at the moment, so I'm on tour with the book. So I'm at Edinburgh Book Festival.
Oh, wow.
So I'm joining you from Scotland.
Oh, that's nice. It's a lovely warm Sydney day today, so it's probably about the same temperature as Edinburgh.
Oh, it's very cold here.
Yes.
It's always cold in Edinburgh.
Even summer, yes.
Even summer. Yep.
So congrats on the book. It's so good. I mean, I inhaled it really. It's quite powerful. It was tough. I mean, I have to say it's tough to read in places, but such an insight into the machinations of high-profile US trials. How does it feel having it out in the world finally?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is such a relief to have it out in the world, because this really was such an intricate process. I mean, I've been working on this book for almost 5 years.
Gosh.
And so that was, before and after the actual trial itself, which was in December of 2021. And, it is the trial itself was one thing, but then I found that I met and became close to a lot of the victims, and my investigation became much wider than the trial itself. And so the years that followed were consumed by investigative reporting about this case that is really, really shocking. There's so much that the world doesn't know about this case. And then, of course, it's very hard legally to publish a book like this. In Australia and the UK, we have very, very tough defamation laws. And so it just took so long to pull everything together in a form that was publishable. So I'm very happy that it's out in the world. There's much more that I would like to report about this case. So, I am going to keep working. But yeah, I'm happy to see it out in the world and connecting with survivors.
Yeah, wow. I can imagine the legal hoops. I mean, you touch on it a little bit in the book, particularly near the end, but it must be so hard to do all that and know there's so much more you just can't tell.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, we are living in a time both in Australia and in England and Wales where the courts are very hostile to public interest journalism. I mean, in Australia, we have just had the Bruce Lemon judgment, which is a really important development in the right direction. But, that is kind of the exception. Otherwise, the trend is going towards the law really protecting the wealthy and powerful, bringing defamation lawsuits against public interest journalists and victims of crime who want to speak up. So it's incredibly frustrating because there was so much reporting about this case and about all the different people that the victims had met and were trafficked to that I wanted to include in this book, but I couldn't because I was told that anything I reported in this book, I would have to be able to prove to a criminal standard, so a beyond reasonable doubt standard. And that's a really big problem legally because defamation is a civil claim. So the standard there should be the balance of probabilities, which is literally just 51%, more likely than not that this happened. And that's the bar that journalists should be expected to clear. But we're moving towards a world in which journalists are expected to clear the criminal bar, the beyond reasonable doubt standard, in order to publish anything. And that means that journalists have to be public prosecutors as well as investigative journalists. And that's almost impossible.
Well, it's hard because obviously the victims of Maxwell's crimes don't have the same they don't have access to the same sort of legal counsel and really expensive lawyers that Maxwell did. I mean, they're all struggling in different ways for obvious reasons. And they just their rights are not protected to the same extent.
Oh, absolutely. And, in a world where you have very, very wealthy people who can spend endless amounts of money bringing unmeritorious defamation claims, and then the subjects of those claims have to fund a defense. And if they can't, then it just has the effect of silencing that person. And it has a huge chilling effect in general. So it is really frustrating how much reporting I had to take out of this book. And I really hope that our kind of system of defamation laws starts to change because at the moment, it really is serving perpetrators of abuse and the wealthy and powerful in general. And quite often those two things overlap. But even when they don't, these defamation laws are serving those people and not serving victims or the journalists who want to speak out on their behalf.
So hard. I really admire the depth of your research and your commitment to those victims. You said it took you 5 years to write the book and you still keep in touch with many of the victims. So is that true? Do you speak to them a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I speak to them weekly and, at this point, they really there's been so much happening with the banks cases, the JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank cases, and they really need a break at the moment and to kind of close this chapter. So, and because the book was such hard work for them, I mean, we had to go through their chapters so many times and fact check every single word and every single sentence. And that was really hard on them, and they were unbelievably generous and willing to do that with me. But definitely right now they need a break from all of this, so we're not actively working right now because I think it's really important for everyone to take a break. But they feel frustrated in the same way that I do, that there are things that they told me and could prove that we weren't allowed to put in the book.
Yeah, it must have taken so much time and energy to both follow the trial and then write the book. Did it become your life? Did it take over everything? And have you managed to return to a normal existence?
The very short answer to that is yes, it did take over my life, but I'm glad it did. I mean, I certainly underestimated it as a task before I started, but I'm kind of glad I did underestimate it because I might have been daunted by it.
Yeah.
I didn't quite know how, that I had to get up in the middle of the night to line up to be in the courtroom. I didn't know how tough the actual trial would be. And I also didn't know how close I would become to this story and to so many people at the center of this story. And so it has really been my life for the last few years. And I haven't returned to a normal life as of yet because I'm touring the book at the moment, and then I'm coming to Australia in October and November to tour it then. And so I've been talking about this a lot, but I feel very lucky to be able to talk about it, and I feel lucky that it's out in the world. And at some point, I will move on to the next project, and this will not be my entire life because it has been a very, very long time. But at the same time, it's hard to let it go because, as I said, there are so many threads left hanging, and I do want to keep trying to report what I know and what I really think the public should know.
Yes, so hard. So it's interesting because you actually trained as a lawyer, didn't you? So some of the court machinations you'd understand and be familiar with.
Yeah, that was a real joy of the trial, actually. So I obviously work as a journalist, but I trained as a lawyer, and I really, really loved studying law and working as a paralegal on some big class action cases. And so I really love legal problem solving. And so a lot of people came to me in the press gallery to ask legal questions because this was a federal trial, which meant that Ghislaine was only charged with the trafficking offences, because that's what the federal law covers. And some of those trafficking offences are very complicated. The elements of each offence are very complicated. Things like, whether she enticed the person to get on a plane to cross state lines for the purpose of sexual abuse. And for example, in that particular count, it doesn't matter whether the sexual abuse actually occurred on that particular trip. It only matters where that she believed it would occur when she enticed the person to board the plane. So things like that are very legally challenging to understand. And this whole indictment was very challenging. So I really enjoyed that and being able to explain that to other journalists. Because there were so few journalists there that I just happened to be the only person who was legally trained. So that was incredibly helpful, and also it gave me a perspective on kind of the prosecution's strategy as well, which was a bit confounding to some journalists, and anyone who reads the book will know that the prosecution's case was very narrow. It covered a very short period of time compared to how long we know this sex trafficking ring went on for. It involved very few survivor witnesses, despite other survivors having told me that they wanted to testify. So, it gave me a perspective on that. My theory on that is that the prosecution just really wanted to secure a conviction because they had messed up so badly by letting Jeffrey die in jail. So they just wanted to make sure they got a conviction. So they kept it as narrow as possible. And, to their credit, they of course did get a conviction. But, the flip side of that is that there was a lot of evidence that was not presented at trial. And so my legal training could kind of give me an insight into what was happening there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'd love to talk about some of your other writing because I understand you're a journalist and a court reporter. So who do you work for? Was it 360? Tell us a little bit about that. And did you put it aside while you wrote the book, or did you write the book on late at night and on weekends? How did it go?
I say I wish I could have put my day job aside to write the book. That's only because it's very, very hard to write a book like this in your free time. That's not to say I don't love my day job, because I really, really do. So I work for an American news wire, so similar to kind of Reuters or the AP, but focusing on courts and crime. So in I was about to say here in London, forgetting that I'm actually in Edinburgh, but in London, normally I am in the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court every day, covering whatever trials are going on and reporting on that. So that's my day-to-day reporting life, which I really, really enjoy. And this, I mean, I did take some time out to write this book because it was just such a huge
Well, you had
undertaking.
3 or 4 weeks of trial as well, didn't you?
Well, yes, exactly. And that was completely consuming because, I only had a couple of hours sleep in between finishing the trial day and starting the next one. So
yeah, the commitment to get up and be at the courthouse by 2 a.m. to get a seat. That's hard.
yeah, it really was. It was so cold. It was the middle of winter in New York, and we had to get up at 2 a.m. and start lining up, and we got snowed on and we got rained on, and
Oh my God.
it was absolutely freezing. So there was that whole chunk of time when I was based in New York while the trial was going on, and then I had to find a way to balance working, my day job with continuing to work on this book. So that involved 3 years of kind of really, really intensive working, because I was interviewing survivors almost every day, as well as pulling the book together, and I was doing all of that outside of my daily reporting job. So I didn't have a life at all. I just worked on this in the mornings and the evenings and on weekends. And so that's, I'm very proud that me and the team that we were working with at Allen and Unwin and HarperCollins, managed to pull it all together, because I think without really good editors, I would have found it very, very hard to write something that made any sense. But it's just part of being a writer, I think, is at the moment in publishing, it's so hard to earn enough to support yourself just through publishing books. So it's important to keep a day job. So I just had to try and balance those things. So it has been nice, apart from all the publicity, to try and give myself a little bit of a break now that the book is out.
Yeah, I was going to ask about if you could make a living. This sort of journalism too, it's hard work, isn't it? It's important, but it doesn't necessarily sell hundreds of thousands of books.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, so you've still got your day job and you're still working sort of as much as you can there.
Yeah, I am. And, you're right. This kind of journalism is really tricky because, it's incredibly important to me, and I can't imagine working this hard on anything else because I care about it so much. But as you say, it's not something that flies off the shelves, because it is hard to read and it's hard to reckon with. And one of the reasons that we know so little about what happened with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell is because people find it hard to accept that this kind of criminality actually happens on such a wide scale, and that these people did this with impunity for decades and decades. So, and even with the kind of articles that I write, outside of the book that are on this subject, so I do a lot of freelance work, for The Guardian and a bunch of other places, on these issues, and even that work as well. We're just living in a time where journalists have to do more and more with less and less, really. So there's a lot of work that goes into doing these kind of investigative stories, and on a freelance basis, it's very hard, for the money that people that publications have the ability to pay doesn't really match the hours that have to go into work like that. So it's very
the
hard.
sort of research involved in the fact checking and everything, that's time consuming and pretty expensive in terms of your time. Yeah.
Exactly. Very expensive. And also, it's such a huge risk if you get anything wrong, because
you could lose
you have
everything.
to be so exactly, you have to be so careful, because you're being trusted with stories from survivors who've been betrayed by other journalists, and obviously been betrayed by so many people in their lives. And so there's what I've learned from this book is that in good journalism there are just absolutely no shortcuts, that there's no way to get around doing all the research and all the work. And it does make it hard to make a living because the pay doesn't reflect that. But I'm very
It's not a
lucky to
good
have
hourly
stable...
rate, isn't it?
No, exactly. If you broke it down, it certainly would not be. But I'm very lucky because I really love my day job, and they're very supportive of the books that I write outside of work. So I'm really lucky to have that stability, and also it's a job in journalism that I really, really enjoy, and those are so hard to come by these days.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear about the process of publishing the book, because it must have been a tough sell, was it? Do you have an agent? Did they do it? Well, you'd had 2 books before, so I guess that helped.
Yes.
How did that go?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. So I had published 2 books before, and this was even before the last one came out. So this was in 2019, 2020, when Jeffrey died in prison, and I realized that he wasn't going to be tried. So when he was finally rearrested, I thought I'm going to be at that trial, because I thought it was so important for the jury and the public to have to grapple with really difficult concepts, not only childhood sexual abuse, but also things like grooming and coercive control.
Yeah.
So I decided as soon as that arrest happened that I would cover that trial. And then obviously not long after that, he died in prison. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. And then Ghislaine went into hiding. And I thought, if they find her, I will make sure to be at that trial. Yeah. So when they did find her, so my second book hadn't even come out yet. I hadn't even started publicizing it yet. It was finished and it had kind of gone to the printers, but it hadn't come out. And I went, and my agent said, "What's next?" And I said, "Well, I think I'd like to write a book about this trial, and it won't happen for a little while, but I think it will be important, and I think it's worth writing a book about." And she is incredibly supportive, and she was like, "Great, yep, that sounds good."
It's quite a brave decision, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And as I said, I didn't quite realize how much of an undertaking it would be, and I'm glad that I didn't, because I'm glad that I wasn't intimidated by it. But she was really supportive, and we worked on the proposal together, which was basically, me setting out why I think covering this kind of trial would really help the public to understand some of those issues, as I said, grooming and coercive control and organized child sexual abuse. Because the mainstream media coverage falls really short, I think, and this is one of the big themes of the book, is that so much of the coverage focuses on perpetrators. Every headline during the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was about private jets and private islands in the Caribbean and Prince Andrew, and the kind of trappings of wealth and power, and I understand that it's easy to get distracted by that, but whether we're doing it intentionally or not, we're living in a time where column inches are precious and airtime is precious. So all the time that you spend talking about those perpetrators, you are taking that oxygen away from the stories of victims. And I went in thinking, I really don't want to spend time in this book thinking or writing about the perpetrators. So, it really isn't a book about Jeffrey Epstein. It really isn't a book about Ghislaine Maxwell, although she is present in the courtroom. I really wanted it to be a book that focused on the stories of the survivors. So that was how I presented it to my agent, and that was how she presented it. I had a really amazing editor at Allen and Unwin, and she supported this book even before the trial had happened, which was the only reason I was able to move to New York, because I had already sold the book to Allen and Unwin. So it was their support. We didn't sell it in the UK until after the trial and after I'd written most of it, but my publishers in Australia are just very, very supportive, and so months and months before the trial had even happened, they were willing to kind of bet on this book and paid me in advance, which allowed me to move to New York. So without that, it wouldn't have happened.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd heard that you won a grant, but for this project, but was that more about an advance rather than a grant?
Yes, exactly. So it was an advance from Allen and Unwin, and that was, because I had a really, really, really supportive editor who kind of believed even before the trial had happened that I would be able to write a good book about it. So I'm very lucky in that regard.
Wow. So you said the book has been out for about a month now.
Yep.
Have you had much feedback from readers, and how does that feel? And is it being all positive, or is it being, do you get trolled? Is it hard like that?
I mean, yeah, it is. It has been overwhelmingly positive. I felt very, very lucky with this book. I've had so many moving messages from survivors who have really appreciated it. And, because I'm on tour with the book at the moment around the UK, I'm kind of meeting readers who are really connecting with it. And that is really amazing. And as I said, I really wanted to keep that focus on the stories of the survivors, and the people I've met have really kind of validated that decision and have really connected with the book on that level. But, of course, when you're writing about this kind of thing, on social media and things, I always have to kind of cover one eye when I open Instagram or Twitter, because, I do get, messages from people who don't like women speaking up about these kinds of issues. So that, there has been a bit of trolling, but I'm also very used to that. I mean, I've been writing about gender and gender-based violence for 10 years as a journalist, and it never really stops. There's always someone on the internet called Paul or Stephen or something who wants to tell me some made up statistics about something to
justify some point.
Yes, exactly. But no, overwhelmingly it's been very positive, and I feel very lucky to be able to get to hear from readers and talk to readers.
I wonder, I mean, writing this sort of trauma-based story, that's hard for you too, isn't it? And people telling these stories. Do you find, I mean, we had somebody on the podcast a while ago who talked about grief. She lost her husband and she wrote about that. And I think that the book tour was quite grueling on an emotional level. Do you find that? And how do you cope?
Yes, it really is. I mean, it's such a paradox touring books like this, because, there is so much joy in it, because, as I said, it is so nice to be able to connect with people. I mean, writing is such a solitary profession.
Yeah.
And especially when, I was writing this book in the middle of the night and on the weekends on my own. And so much of it existed in my own head and with the small group of survivors for so long. So it is really, really joyful in lots of ways to be able to talk to the world about it, and to be able to have people
meet your readers.
Meet the readers and talk to people who've connected with it. At the same time, obviously, there are also parts of my own story in this book, because I'm a victim of a similar kind of abuse, and so it's impossible for it not to be re-traumatizing in some ways. And I have a lot of all my publishers and my agent are incredibly supportive, and I have a lot of support around that. But I also learned from this book and from the last book tour that I really do have to have quite a lot of measures in place when I tour any of my books, because all of them have been on this subject. Because even though it is really nice and I'm very grateful to be able to have a platform to speak about it, it is difficult. I'm doing 2 or 3 events a week at the moment, and it is difficult to be talking about this so often. And of course people, and this is completely understandable, and I really appreciate it, but of course people come up to you and tell you their own stories in book signing lines as well. And so you have to be really well prepared for the re-traumatization of that. And so this time I'm much better prepared. My first book came out when I was 26, and since then I've published 3 books in 5 years, and in that time I've become much better at putting things in place to protect myself. So, lots and lots of therapy and building in kind of time out in between intense weeks of the book tour to kind of sit at home and watch Gogglebox and do nothing and not think about trauma for a day.
I can imagine you'd have to do that, because it's quite emotionally exhausting, and you'd have to sort of have times when you can switch off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be Lucia on the couch.
Well, exactly. And I think also, you kind of forget that when you're touring a book and when you're on stage,
Mm,
there's so much adrenaline involved in it because
mm,
you do have to perform, and I still get nervous.
mm.
So it's also for someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder myself. I know that my nervous system is not particularly good at regulating itself. So when I go into high stress situations, like going on stage in front of hundreds of people, I have to be really careful that I'm able to kind of re-regulate myself
Yeah,
after that stress so that I don't stay in a kind of fight or flight mode
yeah, I can imagine.
just from events about the book. So I've learned a lot this time about managing that. And I've got some really, really great specialist trauma therapists who help me
Mm.
manage the re-traumatization of kind of going through, and talking about this book. And especially with this one, because my last book tours have been quite short, but this one is going to, by the end, will go on for about 8 months or something. So,
Gosh, yeah.
it will be, I have to make sure that I build in those kind of breaks, because no one else will do it for you. That's the other thing that you have to learn, is that
Mm.
you're responsible for your own nervous system and for protecting yourself in these situations. So I have really learned a lot about that.
So a regular question we often ask our guests is about tech tips, because most of our listeners are writers as well, and they love sort of to know if there's any tools or software that you rely on as an author. Maybe something with a book like this, all that research. How did you cope with actually the fundamentals of pulling it all through and knowing where it was?
Yeah, so I'm the worst person on earth to ask for tech tips, I've got to say. I mean, honestly, I'm so bad at it. But I will say that I use Otter an awful lot
Oh,
to
yes.
transcribe interviews. I find that incredibly helpful. I mean, obviously, I also have video recordings and audio recordings and 10,000 backups, but I find Otter incredibly helpful. And then just in terms of research with this project, I ended up having just kind of boxes and boxes and boxes marked, with different parts of this story, because I had all the trial transcripts. Obviously, I had
Yep.
my own notes from the trial, so that took up a whole box, which was just my handwritten notes from each day of the trial, and then the formal transcripts, which were thousands of pages, and then I would have boxes of books about Robert Maxwell, for example,
Mm.
books about the Maxwell family, all the other books that have been written about this case. And so this is such a non-techie answer. This is a very kind
So
of
you've got boxes all over your study. Is that what you're saying?
yes, that's pretty much what I'm saying. I wish I could say that I used a really good piece of software to kind of keep it all together, but I'm a very analog person. So
Yes.
I literally had my whole wall covered with just a kind of chart that started in 1991 and ended in 2023, and it just had all of the important pieces of the timeline and things highlighted in different colors,
Mm.
and photos, and like I list all the evidence I had for each event, so it'd stick the photos up next to each event that could prove that they happened. And so I'm very visual like that, and I'm too bad at technology to know if there's any software that can do that for me. So I do, it looked like a kind of year 7 poster project, but
But it
just
worked for
like
you.
yeah, it worked.
Yeah. So where can people find out about you, more about you, and connect with you, and of course buy your book? I assume it's out in all bookstores now.
It is, yeah. It's out all across Australia and New Zealand in whatever your favorite bookstore is. I am always happy to chat, so I'm on Instagram. My handle is just Lucia OC, so LUCIAOC, and
Mhm.
I'm always happy to chat on there. I love connecting with people on Instagram. I'm on Twitter as well, although Twitter is becoming a very difficult place to
It's a
be.
bit problematic sometimes, yes.
Yeah, but now I'm still on there.
Mhm.
So I'm at Lucia OC _, which is only because I made a Twitter account when I was 21 that was just Lucia OC. and it's very embarrassing, but I actually can't get into it in order to delete it. So
Yes, I think we can all relate to that.
very bad at tech. So my professional one has an underscore after my name. And I also have a website that has a contact form, and I have a lot of readers contact me through that, which is really, really lovely. So that's a really easy way to get in touch with me. And yeah, the book is out everywhere. I mean, I haven't been back home to Australia since it's come out, so I haven't been able to physically see it on shelves, but I have lots of nice friends in Sydney who've been sending me photos and things. So yeah, hopefully listeners will spot it out in the world.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lucia. It's so lovely to chat to you. All kudos to you, because it's a really important book and it's quite a powerfully and beautifully written book. So congratulations.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's okay. It's been really good. So, but that brings us to the end of our show, and I'll put links and all of the socials and website that Lucia mentioned, and we'll be back next week. Thanks.
Thank you so much for
Thanks.
having me.
Okay. Bye. Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors, Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software that helps freelancers run their business with confidence.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you can check your welcome emails for an exclusive discount code on the annual subscription rate. You can also find it in the private Facebook Gold group, or just contact us at hello@rachelslist.com.au.